Hello, and welcome to the Sister Leaders Podcast. Of course, I am Dr. Karen Hills Pruden, and I am so excited about this discussion because it is hot, and it is trending. And I got a couple of other powerful sister leaders who wanted to discuss it. We are discussing the movie today, Divorce in the Black, the latest Tyler Perry release. There is so much juicy information in it. We decided that, hey, let's jump on a podcast and let's discuss it. So I am, again, as I mentioned, Dr. Karen Hills Pruden. Of course, I am a high performing leadership strategist. I generally work with individuals who either own their own business or seek senior leadership in corporate America. And I'm going to open the floor to Dr. Joanne Wescott, if you can explain who you are and what you do in this space called life.
Hi, I'm Dr. Joanne Wescott. I am the founder and the CEO of Delmarva Community Consultant Services. I consult with healthcare businesses as well as on a professional level for upper leadership. I do business consultant, and I also specialize in the mental health arena. I'm a registered nurse by trade. I have my doctorate degree in strategic leadership with a concentration in organizational leadership. I also own and have other entities of businesses, but for the most part, I am a servant leader, and I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. The other great sister leader that's on deck is Crissy Johnson. Crissy Johnson, introduce yourself and share with us what you do in this space called life.
Hi, my name is Crissy Johnson, and I am the president of Mom Advocate Foundation, which is a childhood cancer foundation that focuses on awareness about childhood cancer. My son was diagnosed with cancer in 2017 at the age of 1 year old. That is how I became the Mom Advocate, where we advocate for children and families. I'm also known as the Product Label Queen. Product Label Queen is a commercial printing business that specializes in product label designing and branding for small businesses in the health and beauty industry. I am also an author, Fighting for King David and Residue of War, as well as being a co-author in many anthologies. I believe in helping the next woman to the next level, and I believe in self-care, and I am so happy to be on this podcast today.
Awesome. And we are happy to have you anytime that I can play in the sandbox with my sister leaders and discuss anything that is trending and that is relevant to what's going on today. I am excited. So, Divorce in the Black. I looked at the movie 4 times. And each time I saw something different. And so I know a couple of you have seen it multiple times as well. And so what I did was, because I know it was packed. It was packed with a whole lot. So I have a couple of questions, statements, comments, just kind of to get us started, and then we will take it from there. We are not held hostage to anything that I have written here. It is just to get us organically started in the conversation. And so the first thing I want to talk about, and I want you to individuals to also chime in as well, is that the power of the role of the mother over her children. The opening scene of the movie, very powerful, just very powerful. And there was a directive from the mother to her sons to commit an action, and 2 of them hesitated at first. 2 hesitated at first until the mother said, do this, do this thing. And so I thought about, and then throughout the movie, you saw the dynamic of the mother and her sons, and the sons did not want to disappoint their mother in any way. And even if they hesitated initially, they usually succumbed to whatever it is that she was asking them to do. And so that got me to thinking about the power of the authority and the position of the mother over children. And so let's talk about that. What did you see the same thing that I saw? Did you see, and what is your thoughts on the position of the mother in the family and the role that we have? I'm a mother, and the role that we have over our children, and sometimes that we, even if they hesitate or may not be on board, but because of our role in the family, they may follow suit with that action. Your thoughts on that?
I don't mind going first.
Okay.
Oh, so for me, the mother has a lot of influence. As the baby is in the womb, that is one of the first voices that the infant hears. And being that you are in that womb space, it's almost like a natural relationship, like the first everything, the first person that you trust, because this is a person that you've always been connected to. And so as a child, you don't want to disappoint your mom, because you're like, my mom is proud of me. My mom is like my hero. And so when I saw, the things that happened throughout this movie, it just made me see the grown men as little boys. It's almost like there was like looking up to mom. If I don't do this, I'm going to disappoint my mom. I don't want to disappoint my mom. I want to make her proud. And so I saw a whole bunch of little boys that are just trying to make their mom happy. And that relationship between their mom obviously was extremely close, because they trusted her to even make that decision that they did when they decided to, um, remove their sibling from the coffin.
Awesome. Dr. Joanne, your thoughts on the power of a mother over their children?
From what I observed, and Crissy, I commend you for that. That is a true foundation. But what I observed on the particulars in the clips in the movie, the mother and the sons were traumatized. The shaping of the sons from youth to where they are now was traumatic. There's a clip that shares about one son having to kill his father because of his beating to the mother. So, as young children in a household that's dysfunctional, you're shaped in a manner of not just the mother, but you're shaped in your surroundings. You're shaped in your environment. And as the mother being the victim and mother being their survival, it was a lot of manipulation that took place with that.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of PTSD on the son's part, and a lot of PTSD and anger on the mother's part. So a control was a factor for her. Pride was huge, because that was what was holding on to overcoming the stigma of the violence. But at the same time, again, that was the only parent that was there. That was the parent that they saw that suffered the most damage because of the physical abuse. So as males, they are protectors in nature, as kings, upcoming kings to protect the queen. Um, the trauma of what they experienced enabled them to be able to just, whatever the mother said, whether it was right or wrong, that was all they had, was each other, from surviving from what they had endured for over the years.
You're on mute.
Yes.
Sorry, I love that. And I certainly love both of your insight. Um, I don't disagree with you. I actually, when I saw the first scene, the very first opening scene, which I think like captivated all of us, just because it was very unusual request, unusual request, and to see it facilitated, one, carrying their loved one out of a church, out of a funeral, without the casket, was just something that just I hadn't even heard of, even in a movie or a book. But I kept my eye on the mother, because she was the most powerful figure in that scene. What she said and what she desired changed the whole trajectory of that whole event. Even with grown men, and I think Crissy had mentioned the fact that they were grown men, not young boys, not teenager. I mean, very grown, not even 18, 19. They were seasoned, grown men, and it just really showed me the power that we have as mothers over our children, and we could either exploit it, or we could either encourage and enhance a positive relationship for the betterment of our children. Throughout that movie, that was a theme that kind of carried with me, is that man, she is very powerful, and wow, what could she have done if she had used her power in another way for these gentlemen? Because she'd had, I don't even know how many it was, 3 or 4 of them. I couldn't figure. I think it was 3, 4.
I think it was 5. Is it 5 total?
I don't know.
4.
4. Okay.
I thought it was 4. It was 3 that went behind the guy, and the one son in the front that was on one scene. On one scene,
Okay.
I can remember 3 coming from behind the pastor, and the one son in the confrontation with the pastor. So I think it was 4.
Okay. Yeah.
So
I mean,
4, and then the one that was deceased.
Yeah, and so just think about the impact that she could have had on 4 grown men lives who no longer had their father for whatever reason, who no longer, for good. Think about if she was pouring into them in a positive way, encouraging them to do positive things for themselves, for their community, for the family. Because she definitely had the authority. They definitely listened to her. Unfortunately, some of the things that she desired for them to do was adverse to a positive livelihood for them. But yeah, so that was the first thing that hit my mind, is the power of a mother. Another thing that kind of touched base with me, and I would love to hear both of your discussion on this, is that I've heard many times that, people who grow up in abusive relationships either go one or 2 ways. Either they are adamant about not being an abuser and facilitating that type of abuse on another individual, or they may have the capacity to grow up to be an abuser because that's the lifestyle that they know. So in this particular movie, we had 2 different dynamics, but they ended up in the same relationship, and I'm going to explain what I meant. So we had Dallas, who grew up in an abusive relationship, which we were able to find out throughout the movie. Dad beating mom, and Dallas mentioned that his dad died at his hands at the direction of his mother. But we also had Ava. Ava, who grew up in a loving home, the exact opposite of it. But yet they ended up coming together. And Ava did not flee from at the first point that she experienced, whether it was emotional, mental, or physical abuse. She did not flee. They were together for about, I would say about 17 years. 17 years, everybody kept saying 17 years is when they came together as a young couple. But they had been together for over a decade. The mom had mentioned it, over a decade. So they had been married for over a decade. So Ava didn't flee, even though that was the first time that she saw it. It was unknown to her because she grew up the opposite of that. She stayed, and she talked about why she stayed, and that's I got some questions about that as well. But let's talk about the impact of being in a situation, one, that you don't always have to grow up in that situation to find yourself in that situation, and it doesn't always mean that you're going to flee, because those around Ava said, you don't know this life. This is not what you was raised in. Why did you stay? As if to say, because she didn't grow up in that, she should have immediately had left. And
Right.
it was a lot deeper than that. And we know life is a lot deeper than that. And so
Right.
I'd like to get your thoughts on that. We'll start with you, Dr. Joanne, your thoughts on um, background, upbringing, fleeing, and how we all respond differently, even to something that is unknown.
I could somewhat relate to Ava. She was trying to keep her marriage. She was trying to stand on the vows. She was trying to mimic what she had been exposed to from her parents. And she also wanted to help her husband. And a lot of times, as females, we do fall into that because we're nurturers. And we fall into that trap of wanting to help, even at the extent of our own discomfort. So she stayed. She did not see that that was an option to leave. She didn't understand for a very long time as to why he was doing what he was doing to her. It wasn't until later, many years later, she found out what was the corporate. And with that, she was heartfelt and she felt even more compelled to want to stay in it and want to try to help him. Even she did suggest for him to get help. She did. But at the same time, and she kept what happened in their marriage private as much as she could. And to the point that she succumbed to this was a normal way of life for her. This was normal. This was accepting because of her wanting to be married. And then she penalized herself by looking at her own age and looking at herself as something that was not in completion to keep her husband, to satisfy her. She was so torn with it's me, it's myself. Am I the problem? What can I do different within myself? To the point that she was really blindsided by the fact that even though her parents gave her this wholesome appearance of what a marriage couple looked like, they still did not give her all of what is involved in a marriage because of the privacy of the marriage and the fact that they were representative of being ministry family. They wanted to present biblically for better, for worse. And so that in itself stayed with her, and to the point that she did have her breaking point. But I won't go any further with that breaking point till we talk about that.
Absolutely. Crissy, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
So, I always believe that you can give the foundation to your child. You can teach them, give them all the resources and everything. However, when they get to a certain age, they have their own mind. And sometimes when you fall in love, all the things that you have been taught, all the things that has been a foundation goes out the window because we know that love is a powerful drug. So with Ava, I think that she knew like his situation, and like she kept mentioning that every time that he would go through this, I don't know this, I don't want to call it a tantrum, but when he would go through this where he would do things to her, that he would give her a little bit of what was going on with him. Like we saw in the scene where he was completely drunk, and he basically exposed to her that,
Mhm.
hey, my mother made me do it and I'm not worth this, I'm not worth that. So she's getting like the little boy version of him every time he gets to this point. So I think for her, she was like, okay, he's giving me this and there's something wrong. I can fix him and I can love him and I can nurture him at the expense of herself. I think she didn't realize that she was actually sacrificing herself and her well
Mhm.
being for him until
Mhm.
after her friend said to her, like, hey, I've wrote down everything that he's ever done to you. And I think when you see it on paper, that you will realize sometimes we have to kind of see the breakdown. The flags can be waving. And I think she just completely said, okay, well, it looks like a red flag, but maybe it's yellow. Kind of
Mhm.
made an excuse for what she was seeing because she loved them. But we
Yeah.
all know that love itself is powerful. And I
Yeah.
think she just got, you know, in that she didn't want to leave him because she knew his story. She knew what he was dealing with. She understood where he came from, although she didn't live the life. However, she saw how toxic it was. And if you think about it, she kind of moved, I don't know if she moved them away, but I gathered that she remove herself from that atmosphere, him, and they moved somewhere else and he was doing better for himself because she did mention that he was working and that he has to work. So he
Mhm.
was doing good for himself. I just think that he just had a lot of trauma
Yeah.
and that wasn't processed. And all of a sudden, it just kept building up and it got worse and worse and worse. And she didn't want to give up on him because she's like, my mom didn't give up on my dad, stay in the
Mhm.
marriage. You said to be loyal to my husband. And so she was doing all the things she was taught. However, I think that you can't really always prepare your children for the negative part. Like what to do if this happens. You
Exactly.
can tell them, but once
Absolutely.
you're in that moment, there's nothing you can do except for go through it and experience and hope that you'll make the correct decision and look at the facts and not just make it what you want it to be.
I love that. And that's a good segue into what I was thinking in terms of a comment. And so, stand by your man. People divorce too early. Stay in the marriage. Those are comments that were made in the movie. And I would venture to say that if we are going to make such comments in the presence of our children, that we have to tell them under what circumstances do those comments not apply. Which it goes to what you were saying is that we don't speak enough about the exception to the statements because I believe as parents or our loved ones, when we do make those statements, we're not thinking when we make those statements
Mhm.
um, through everything and anything. As the mother said, I was not talking about this when she had that list. I was
Exactly.
not talking about this. And your father and I are not you and Dallas, meaning that the stuff that you went through. But when was the daughter, when was Ava supposed to know the exceptions to the rule if you never talked about the exceptions? And so I
Right.
think there was flawed messaging
Mhm.
when those type of statements are made. Stand by your man, stay in the marriage, people divorce too easy. I think those are flawed statements if you do not follow those statements with sub statements saying under what circumstances is it okay to not stand by your man, under what
Right.
circumstances is it okay to not stay in the marriage. And
Mhm.
no, divorce is, people don't divorce too easy. Generally, by the time we hear about divorce, is at the end of the road.
Uh-huh.
People don't talk about the traveling to get to divorce.
That's
So it's
right.
not that people divorce too easy, it is that we are private people. Don't tell your business outside of your house. I don't know how many of
Uh-huh.
y'all was raised like that.
Yes.
Keep our business. And so no one hears about the journey. Everybody hears about the end destination, which is sometimes
Mhm.
divorce. And
Mhm.
so
Right.
I think that there is flawed messaging when it comes to some of the things that we say in the presence of our young ones. And they
Mhm.
take those sound bites, those bits and pieces, and use it as a game plan to live their life, and that is not setting them up for success. And so that's my thought. So the next thing I want to talk about is the role of church.
Uh,
Ah, Lord Jesus, the
yes.
role of church. And so there was quite a few situations that brought to my attention the role of church, particularly when the mother was very reflective after she had read that list of actions written by the best friend. Um, and she said, I failed you. And Ava said, "You didn't fail me." And the mother said, "I feel like I failed you because I was outside of the home taking care of everything and everybody else." I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah.
And it was stuff going on here that I should have been more attentive to. And then she even talked about not giving compliments and not telling her daughter how proud she was because she didn't want her to be prideful, which I've actually heard that comment before. And I thought that from the person that I heard that from, that they were the originator, but apparently it's a thing. It's a thing where people don't compliment their children because they don't want their head to swell up, which is crazy because they spend more time with you and you are the person who's feeding into them, into who they're going to be when they're an adult. And so if you aren't feeding into them positive things about how wonderful they are, how beautiful they are, how smart they are, then they don't have that foundation that is going to carry them when they go outside of the house and someone else tell them you aren't wonderful. Well, I am wonderful because for 25, 30 years, someone told me I was wonderful, so I know I'm wonderful. And so, church, the role of church, and some church people who have things that they may not address in their own home because they are so adamant about spending so much time at church, being in ministries, being in every time the church doors is open, and then their house is in disarray. So let's talk about your thoughts on the role of church and people who are extremely active in church, and who may not be paying as much attention as they need to their own home life, and the detriment that it can be for children who grew up in that situation. So I'm going to flip it and start with you, Crissy, this time.
So yeah, definitely. I believe that church starts at home. Community building starts at home. So that foundation is important. And so I do agree with you. You see that people are committed to the ministry, but they're not committed to their families at home, which should be their first line of ministry, which is your family. So what happens is that, people are like, oh, well, I'm doing it for God's people. This is why I'm always there when the church opens. And then when something happens in their family, it's like, okay, let me push this to the side because I got to go to church to do X, Y, Z, A, B, C. Instead of flipping it and putting family first, and have the church having understanding that there is family that they need to take care of. And I think some people hide behind the church sometimes. They just basically didn't have that type of relationship with their parents or with their family growing up in the household, because to them it was normal to keep going to church, to go, 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 go. But you're not having these conversations at home. You're not building relationship at home. You're not affirming your children at home. So when they do go out there, out into the community, they don't have the armor that they need to fight because it wasn't built for them while they were home at a young age. So it is important that you actually start at home. Everything starts at home. And even if you do build what the kids need to survive out there in the world, you have to be confident that your children are going to survive. You have to have confidence in them. And sometimes children can pick that up. If their parents are not confident in them, or they feel like they're not being valued, all of that will show up in a child during their adulthood. We have a lot of people that are walking around here that are in the church that are still children mentally. It just never grew out of it. So I think it's associated with a lot of trauma, and not talking about it. Like for some reason, it's like, leave it at home. We don't talk about it. Just sweep it underneath the rug. And that type of mentality, it just causes people to just be stuck in trauma.
Dr. Joanne, your thoughts to this discussion?
Well, the foundation is with the Most High, and the foundation should occur at home. But if you're a family that is already in ministry, then you have the combination of both. You have that because home is same as your ministry versus when you in the congregation with the ministry. It's like all in the same. When the mom had said she felt she failed her because she felt the impact of the pain from what she read from the paper. So not necessarily if she had esteemed her daughter on when she performed well in track, which they were there, they cheered her on. There are many ways to say, I'm proud of you if you don't come out and say, I'm proud of you. There are many ways to show your support. And I believe that they show tremendous amount of support. But as a mother, you first feel like when your child is going through something traumatic, that you are the one that failed her, that you're the one that somehow didn't do what you're supposed to do. Yes, she was out doing ministerial work. She was outside of the home, but she was this young lady was the only child. And I do not believe that she was neglected. I do not believe that there were any issues that was going on in the home that caused traumatic issues that negatively impact her. I don't. However, it's a difference between religion and spiritual. Sometimes we become more religion in the denominational area and not so much spiritual, that we're in tune with the Most High to know what it is that we need to do in the nurturing in the spiritual realm. So I say all that to say this because it takes me back to the event that the husband used. He used his power figure to condemn and to judge. So he was out of line with that. And the wife had been so conditioned and so used to whatever it is that how the husband led, even in ministry, that's how she followed. Because clearly it became more of a religion setting than more than just the spiritual relationship. So I don't believe there was a disconnect with the mom and the daughter, but I believe the daughter neglected to share some private information with the mom because again she wanted to continue this uh, road of making them proud, making them feel she's successful at what she does. And I think that's what happened with that mantle. She from a little girl up, that she was their pride and joy. And she was able to succeed at different levels. And she did not want to be a disappointment. And then like I said, as a mom, we self-reflect. What could I've done differently? Even if she have done things differently, she has no control of the future event that the daughter would have been with uh, a man that was suffered from PTSD and that he had been so traumatically damaged. So there's no preparation that you can prepare for something like that at the time of events when they occur. If you have an open relationship and you can come and discuss these things, but as Dr. Karen said, traditionally we don't discuss private matters. We don't they say you bring it to church, you bring certain things to church, you bring it in there to talk about it, but we don't. We don't bring those issues into the church setting. We are very private with it, and that's where a lot of damage occurs. And as you said, later on it shows itself, to be in a negative impact. But no one is really the blame for it all. Yes, can we do things differently? Yes, we can all sit and think about what we could have done differently. But in this aspect, there was no prevention in that, because we're all individuals. As Crissy said, we all have our own individual personalities, and how we perceive uh, certain events and how we handle certain events as adults. That's the maturity that we are in. That's how we grow and how we learn. Unfortunately, when we're molded with some aspects of life that are not as good as others, but that is life.
I love that. And so I got a few more things I just want to touch on, because I just do not want to close out this podcast without us speaking on this, because they were just powerful. how important is it to always have an open door for our children, regardless of their age? So we saw in this movie that was extremely important for her to have somewhere to go. And thank goodness that her family dynamics allowed her to come back home. I mean, she had a key and everything. Came back home, got into bed, went in her childhood bedroom. Daddy heard her come in, didn't even address her, just probably saw it was her and let her be. Told mom, "Hey, she's daughter's back." But that scene, that whole situation, let me know that it is important for when our children are outside of the home and in volatile situations, whether it is physical, emotional, or mental, for them to know that they have somewhere to go to exit from that place, regardless of their age. Because she was 37 years old and she knew that she could go back home to get away from that. And I think about the dynamics of hearing people where kids can never come back home, that are put out when they graduate from high school and different things, or those parents who have been at the end of their line and have expressed to their children, don't come back here, because parents have been frustrated. But let's talk about that dynamic, because I think that was critical to how she was able to come out of it, even though we know that the movie had an interesting ending. But she was able to go and process, reflect, devise a game plan as to how she was going to feel about it in a safe space, before she re-entered. And she ended up re-entering it because she had to have closure. So she had to go back to close out that chapter in her life. So I'm not mad at her for having to go back. But had she not had that safe space to be able to process that and have someone to talk to, I think it would have maybe delayed how long it took her to get to a point of, where she could go back and reflect and see her for who she really is. And so your thoughts on that, Dr. Joanne?
I am a mother myself. I have 3 sons and a daughter. And often when your children reach an age of adulthood, and they go out in this life and they experience life, and I got it, I'm a man now, I'm grown, I can this, I can that. But when you love your child, you always have that door open, because we have lived this life. We know what trauma can be about. We know the diversities out there in life. They don't. They yet to experience it. And I had an incident with one of mine. I got a call in the late of night, devastating call, because again, emotions play a big factor in our development. And when you're brokenhearted and you're experiencing something that you have never experienced, because you've never been brokenhearted from your mother. It's always we may have discipline in certain areas, but when you are brokenhearted and you have been just wounded and just disappointed to the point that you don't even know yourself, it could go one or two ways. You can react in a negative way, or you can react in a positive way. What I mean by that, a lot of times people try to take control over someone else to get them to be disciplined, to act the way they want them to act, to be who they want them to be, to do as they want. And sometimes they try to do that by force. If they know that they've tried the loving, nurturing part of them, of who they are, and that don't work, and then they try to use it by force, or whatever control they feel they can do to get that person to succumb to where they want them to be, in that happy place in their heart, in their life. You never know. But I was so happy not to hear what I heard, but to know that you could reach out to mom, that you could call me and say, my situation is blah, blah, blah. Right there is the time where I can deposit that is positive into you, and to wheel you into a safe place. Because in the mind, it doesn't take but a second to have the wrong thought, and it just happens just like that. but to be able to have that love connection and that bond to say, hey, come on home. Do you need me to come get you? Or do you need me to meet you? Come home. Because that's a vulnerable, delicate place in a person that you could lose your child if you don't choose to say the right word. And I was like, come home. And I've always had that love for my children that regardless where I am, you are always welcome to come to where mom is, regardless. Uh, I don't want the drama to come. I don't want you to come in a fashion of rage and where the evil spirit just is taking over you to the point that you forget that you're coming to mom. But at some point in time, you don't know when they come what type of dynamics will be on them, whether they're going to be in a rage. And then you have to know how to calm that down because they're not always coming meek and humble. So you have to know how to calm it down, how to be able to use your intellect and your nurturing as a mother and the love you have to take that child right back into your arms to help them to heal. So my door has always been open. I have experienced it with all three sons, especially my sons. I've experienced it, but I understand what it is because I will self-reflect now. I did not always have that. I did not always have that, and because of some of the dysfunctionalities that I myself was exposed to, um, I didn't want that for my children. And then, two, I didn't want to overprotect them. And sometimes I, too, as the mother said, as the previous question was about the mother felt responsible. Sometimes I, too, had felt responsible about some things that maybe I could have done differently. Maybe I was too protective, but I don't know where we draw the line as mothers. How can we say that we're too protective? How can we say that we love too much of our own? I get need to be able to find that fine line. I try not to pry into their business. I try not to be the controlling factor of this is how you should live your life um, when certain situations come up because you have to learn. You have to learn. But anything that will cause you to be away from home, such as this young lady, and for you to be able to come back and to be able to regroup and find yourself and just understand yourself and be around love that is not violent love, that the be around the love that is not physically abusive, not emotionally abusive, not verbally abusive. That will heal. And that is what happened. She was able to heal in that atmosphere. And that's what we as mothers, we should do.
Love that. Crissy, your thoughts on this topic?
I believe that home should always be a safe place. We always talk about to our kids because we have a different range of ages, how important it is to have a safe place. This is your home is your safe place. You can always come back. I try to stay out of my adult kids' business unless they want to share with me. But I do find that they do come and share things with me, and they'll say, "Well, mom, what should I do?" And I'll just give them my advice. But I say at the end of the day, you have the tools and resources available to you to make that your own decision. And try not to control everything that's going on with their life because once they get outside, there's nothing that I can really do. I can only influence them in the home and hoping that they have the resources they need to survive out in the world. I would never want them to be in a situation where they have nowhere to go. I would be more worried about my child not having somewhere to go. And that would haunt me forever. I mean, I don't know about some people, but there's no way I can have my child like with nowhere to go and no safe place. Because I know how it is to not have a safe place. Because I was raised in fairly an old school way, it's almost like we don't talk about certain things but children need to talk about how they feel, express their feelings without judgment. And sometimes that could be difficult as a mother because I find myself sometimes like clenching my teeth because I'm like, oh my gosh, trying to hold my expressions together because right then they need me and I cannot, judge them. But I'm thinking like, I hope I don't see, watch my facial expressions. And it took a while for me to get to that point because they're looking at you. They're like, look, I did this and I know I was wrong, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, oh my God, as a mom in my head, but I realized I can't respond. And I will tell you the response thing of learning how to respond the right way, it took a long time for me to build that. A lot. I think with the third kid, I have 4 kids. The third kid, I realized how important the timing of my response and how I respond is very important. So definitely having a safe place and the fact that Ava had that and they didn't question like what's going on? Like immediately, they gave her time to actually process. They did not invade in her space. When she was ready, she talked about it, which is important because she had to process. She had to process everything that she went through and the fact they allowed her the opportunity to process. And their parents, they're probably going crazy, like what is going on? What is going on? What's going on? But they knew how important it was to allow her to process that. And then when she came to start talk about it, she was more open and more honest of saying what she was dealing with, and so the parents were able to respond in the right way. I would say, well, yeah, she did were able to respond and help her. Because I would say there could be wrong ways that you can respond out of trauma, your own trauma. And so sometimes you have to put yourself aside and not say, well, I would have did this and why I would have done that. No, keep your professional, whatever, how you felt like you would have did away. Like this is a different generation. Like the kids are different.
I love that. I love that. I love that. So we're moving towards the end. I did want to touch on the role of friendship in cases such as this. Of course, we know Ava was an only child. Her best friend of 17 years. And it's funny because everybody kept saying 17 years. So everything was critical to back to high school. She had been out of high school. So 17 years was critical throughout her whole journey because her best friend knew I think her best friend was the only person who knew everything for her to even write out a whole list of everything. So she was open with the best friend. And I think it's important to have someone that you can talk to uncensored, who won't judge you, but uncensored. So I just found the role of the best friend to be critical in this particular movie from start to finish. And then it allowed me to reflect on the role of friendship in cases of volatile relationships, whether it's mental, emotional, or physical. We know just a little bit of what I've read about volatile relationships. Sometimes the aggressor try to pull you away from individuals, but if you are blessed to have at least one confidant that you can talk to, who knows exactly what is going on, who knows where you are, where you are mentally, emotionally. I think that is a contributing factor to how quickly you are able to review and devise a plan as to how you're going to be part of moving forward. And so, your thoughts on the role of friendship in volatile relationships, and we will start with Dr. Joanne. You're on mute.
Sorry. You have to be very, very careful with that because when you're at a place of uncertainty and you take yourself and you take all of what you are and what your emotions and what you're going through and you open that up to someone, even though it is a best friend, but it's a best friend on different other levels that equip you to be able to call that person your best friend. because when you're vulnerable and you open up to that best friend, you want that best friend to have your best interest at hand. You want that best friend to be totally unbiased to a certain extent, but it's hard not to be unbiased when you're the best friend. So it's good to be able to have someone you can talk to, you can share, you can get all of the good and the bad out. But at the same time, you don't want to lose yourself. You don't want to lose yourself. And that's one thing that I could say with Ava. She, even though she shared a lot with the best friend, her own personal values she didn't lose, because you don't want to lose too much of yourself that then you become a mimic, a replicant of the friend, because then you're not going off of your own thoughts, your own intuition, your own feelings. You are vulnerable and you are pretty much doing whatever the friend is saying or suggesting for you to do. And I saw that a couple of times, but then I also saw where Ava was able to uh, defend her own grounds, even though the friend was saying, well, I'll say what's just on my mind. I'll just come out and say this or say that, and then I think one of the person was referring to her as she's ghetto, but because they were almost like night and day, but yet and still they were very good friends. So you do need to have that comrade where you can be able to share, you can be able to talk, and if they have their best interests at hand, even like with Dallas and his friend, he prevented him a few times from putting himself into further harm's way, by sometimes a friend will have to tell you about yourself that you may not want to hear. Not all the time should a friend that really can fits that category can pat you on your back and say, good job, or go ahead and do it. Friends sometimes have to stand in the way of trouble. Give time to let you reflect and see yourself, say, hey, no, you're the one that asked for the divorce. You're the one that wanted this. You're the one that wanted that. A friend have to sometimes take that mirror and turn that mirror back around so you can see yourself. And that's when you have a true friend. Because a real friend is not going to walk you into danger. They're not going to walk you into harm's way. Now, I will say that Ava's friend wanted to try to, from her vision, her insight, to help her celebrate a divorce. I was a little throwback with that, the way that was done, because that's her perspective of how she should celebrate the detachment on paper. But in actuality, let's face it, it doesn't work that way. You sign today, the heart doesn't always leave today. It takes a while to go through your healing process. But to celebrate in that fashion, I, my own personal perspective on that, I felt that was a bit too much. I felt that was a little bit too much to just put her in that setting, and then you're going to give her a pill. I just felt, again, you have to be careful when it comes to somebody else's suggestion on how you should do certain things when you in a vulnerable position. You have to still have somewhat control and be able to use judgment, because again, you know, she thought it was okay to take the pill, but who really knows how that pill would have how she would have reacted, how her body would have responded to that. And then it put her in that position where you have the males, that type of party, like she's coming from a family that ordinarily would not have approved of being in that type of social setting, and she's more reserved. She's not a young lady that really would have just ordinarily walked into something like that. We all have two sides to us. She might have the side what might be curious to that, but after she was in that setting, she went along with it because of certain people that were there. But ideally, I don't think she would have just wanted to go into that type of setting.
Crissy?
So best friends are very important, especially when you go through anything that's traumatic. but at the end of the day, you still have to just be mindful of what they say to you, and also what they're suggesting, because at the end of the day, you don't want them kind of controlling like your life or having you live life the way that they would. You still need to be your individual self. But there are situations where sometimes the friend that is completely blind with what's going on, the best friend has to come and intercede on their behalf. And sometimes it can result in you telling them how exactly you see it, without sugarcoating. And in some cases, you can lose a friend, because you're not siding with them and saying, this and that when they're in the wrong. Because I've had that situation happen to me where I was like, okay, there's no more soft responding, because at this time, your health is at stake, your mental is at stake, and I have to tell you exactly why you're responsible for this other person's actions because you're allowing it. And for when that happened, I was like, was I too hard? Like what exactly, could I said it differently? And no, there's nothing that I could have done. However, as the time went by, the friend came back and said, I appreciate you for being open and blunt and honest with me because I never would have got out of that situation had you not spoken up for me. And so sometimes they need time to reflect. And I think that when Ava was coming from the church and her friend was there, Ava did say to her, or maybe it was her friend's husband said, timing, because she wanted to give her that letter right then and there. Because the friend, it seems like she has been waiting for her to finally wake up and she was just frustrated. But timing is also everything. Timing, because at that moment, had she had done that, that could have broke something else in Ava, and she wouldn't have been able to move on from that situation with all of that stuff that's happening. And also, I recognize that Ava is confident in herself, and Ava does listen to others as well as herself. Because when her parents started talking about the family, she was like, "Oh, y'all talking about me?" Like she was very vocal about the situation and basically trying to let them know like this is not the timing. And the mother's like she's gone through a lot today. So she knows her limits, which is really good because some people don't know their limits. So I just love the fact that she had her friend there outside of her parents, someone that is outside of the household that is able to support her, because sometimes an outside person is essential to some of the decisions that you make, just talking it out with them. So I think the best friend is definitely like a sister to her. And she was definitely pivotal inside the whole entire movie because she was still supporting her, although she felt bad for what she was dealing with. But she did vocalize at the dinner table, even in front of him, like, I don't know why you deal with this. So she was very open and honest, letting her know, like, hey, this is not cool. But the fact that she kept spoken up, and that's what a real friend does. They're not going to be quiet when something is wrong. They're going to be vocal and say, hey, like this got to stop, and even confront the other person. That's what I love about her.
I love that. So we have reached the point and at the podcast where we are at the last question. And so I saved this question because I don't know what was going on with me when I heard this whole scene, but I was like, Lord, am I triggered? Am I, oh my goodness, what in the world? So it is, the question that I have is, does age, and I put age 40 in parentheses, make women stay in volatile relationships out of fear they won't find anyone else? And so there was a scene in the movie where there was a lot of discussion about Ava being a woman of I couldn't figure out if she was just, I think she was just slightly over 40 or approaching 40 because she was 37, so she was approaching 40. And she was expressing to her best friend how her husband had mentioned that they probably would not even have sexual relations because it was gross to have a relations with someone that's 40. And then she mentioned about not being able to find, no one would want a woman over 40, and she's 37. And I, and listening to that conversation, I was like, so it appears to be a fear of nobody's gonna want me because I'm 37, almost 40. And the best friend, as you mentioned previously, Crissy, the best friend was like, girl, you this, you that, you this, and you that. Don't believe that. But that didn't just come up in that car ride. That is something that I believe that she was harboring and feeling and processing throughout as she was getting older through the marriage, because she had mentioned that, you know, she had been with him through all of her young years, and now she's 37, all 3 years away from that magical age of 40, where I guess as a woman life was going to be over. And so my question is your thoughts on older women who are in unpleasant relationships or volatile relationships, and the tendency to stay because the fear of starting over at that advanced age. And so what is your thoughts regarding that? That was, as me, as someone who's over 40, over 50, more closer to 60, it was an interesting conversation for me because I've never felt that way. I'm married, but I've never felt that any particular age was too old if you found yourself single. And so that whole dynamic caused me to realize that maybe there are a lot of women out there who are approaching 40, over 40, who truly believe that they cannot start life over again in terms of romance at 40. And so we're going to start with you, Christina. Crissy, we're going to start with you.
Yeah, when I heard that, I was like, where is that coming from? Because age is just a number. You can find anyone at any age of life, but I think because she kept getting it from her abuser over and over again, she started to believe it. I think it's just something that he put in her mindset. And sometimes if you hear it over and over again, it's like you don't think to question it. You just start saying it yourself. And so I think it was just because Dallas felt that way, not because she felt that way. I think he was eating at her self-esteem the whole entire time. And so she just completely lost herself. But no, age has nothing to do with anything. You can find any type of love in any stage of your life. So I definitely think that was just something that because she kept hearing it, she started to believe it. And then instead of questioning it, she just kind of lived life like, let me hold on to him. It's security. If I don't let him go, then I may end up alone and not being able to find someone else. I think her fear was the fear of starting over, the fear of the unknown. Starting over is uncomfortable. And I think that she was just wanting to stay in it because it was familiar to her. And she already knew what to expect out of the relationship that she was in. So that's kind of why she probably held on so long, because she just wasn't ready to start all over or even to visit the unknown.
Dr. Joanne, I love that, Crissy. Dr. Joanne.
To capitalize off of Christy, the verbal abuse that she endured, and the constant reminder of her age as a negative and not in a positive way. And as women, we tend to hold that our youth is our most beautiful part of us. Um, and as we mature in life, we tend to end up having some flaws that we are not wanting, and we like, how did that happen and why is that there? And we get accustomed to, as we mature in life, that things are not always the way it was when we were in our youth. But to have a man to constantly verbalize that to you is traumatic. And it can have such a devastating effect on you to the point that you don't see yourself beautiful. You don't see yourself, this queen, having a fulfilling life, being able to be a prize, a trophy. You don't. They tear you down. Again, as was mentioned earlier, your self-esteem becomes damaged. It really takes a triumphant queen to go in that inner core and to overcome all those stigmas. And let's face it, she was wrestling with that. She didn't have that strength, that inner strength to be able to go over those hurdles at that time. But she was finding her strength because when you can speak a thing and you can bring that out, you're on your way. And when she was naming, I'm 40, when she was talking about her age and how it was not the one scene when she said to the gentleman, I'm 40, and let's face it, it's only going to be because of this. This is all it's going to be. And he himself, he saw her as this beautiful queen. He didn't see her age. He just saw her for who she was and how he felt about her. But she couldn't see that in herself. But he woke her up and let her know this is this and this is that. You are this 40-year-old queen. And so to say all of that, sometimes in life, it does happen. You have an awakening to say, hey, I'm not, I am 50, but I am beautiful. I am this. And then, we have to give ourselves affirmations. We have to. And as Crissy had mentioned about the friend was able to give her the affirmations. So that was a positive impact from the friend. The parents was able to give affirmations. They allowed her to look at some videos of how she was triumphant and how, the person she was before she was subjected into this type of relationship, with those dynamics. And so it takes someone who see you and not see the exterior of you to sometimes bring you back to reality. And then self-love, you have to have self-love. And she was able to give herself that self-love.
I love it. So we've reached the end of this podcast, and I'm sure there is a lot more that we can say. And I appreciate you, sister leaders, for jumping on this with me. I just wanted to talk about it. There are, on occasion, there is something that hits the mainstream, and I call it the mainstream when everybody is talking about it. When everybody is talking about it, that it allow you to think about the various themes that are in it. And of course, this movie, Divorce in the Black by Tyler Perry, is what we're talking about for those who may be chiming in a little later, into this podcast. If you have not seen it, please check it out. Would love to hear your thoughts. This will be posted, and so would love to hear your thoughts. But I'm going to close out by saying this. A couple of tying in themes that I got from the movie was pray, pray and action, pray, therapy, action. So it is a progressive step throughout all of this. All of those things are needed: prayer, therapy, and action. Those were common themes that were going through the movie amongst all the volatility. And one without the other, I noticed that even the dad came on board at the table discussion when the wife said, just pray. And he was like, wait a minute. Yeah, you can pray, but put some action behind it. And I add therapy because as someone who also that was raised in the church, I believe that we can pray and go to therapy. I believe in therapy wholeheartedly. I don't believe in just prayer without therapy. I believe that we can have a prayer life, which is our pipeline to whoever our savior is, and that we can go to therapy. But even still, when you pray and go to therapy, you still have to do that third bullet, which is action. And I think that is a common theme that was needed, the combination to tie all three in to deal with the volatile situations, because there were situations throughout this movie and almost everybody was going through a reflective stage in their life. And so just know that even when we're going through our reflection, that those that are attached to us are reflecting their role in our lives in that situation as well. So there was those scenes where everyone was reflecting. Again, I am Dr. Karen Hills Pruden. I am the founder of Sister Leaders, and I will be remiss without mentioning our annual conference is coming up October 4th and 5th at the Rivers Casino in Portsmouth, Virginia. If you want more information, the website is sisterleaders.conference.com. Here, we Sister Leaders community is a community of men and women where we are elevating, educating, sharing experiences and networks with women entrepreneurs as well as women in corporate America to become high performing leaders. That's it for today. Stay tuned for the next episode of the Sister Leaders Podcast. Bye.